So we'll call the Community Resources and Tourism Committee meeting to order. And it looks like everyone is here except for Larry Bjork, but I hear a door, so maybe he will be arriving shortly. And the chair, Jim, is online.
I'm online.
Yeah, we just hear a voice. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, any against? I think that was all of us. All right, so the minutes are approved. Were there any public comments? Nope. Okay, and so then we are gonna move 6C, the broadband discussion up so that Dan can give us his report.
If Dan's speaking, I can't hear him at all.
I'm not, sorry, I was working on getting technology going. All right. So, I wanted to come here and, just kind of give our final report from the, broadband task force that has been meeting since, it's been a couple of months now. We've been meeting every Thursday at 1 o'clock in somewhat in this room, mainly online, but it's been a public meeting, so we've been in this room as we do that. This is kind of the final report that task force was asked to create. And I'm just going to kind of go over how we got to where we got to and where the next steps are as far as broadband are concerned. So if there's questions at any point in time, please let me know. There is a written plan as well that was provided to the board members, which is more comprehensive than I plan on going over through this presentation. So broadband task force, we went through getting members. It was actually, to me, one of the more challenging things was oddly enough finding people to be a part of that. So Addison from UW Extension joined us, as well as myself. Holly Benbenek is from CBTC. She ended up replacing Dan Lytle, who is from Dunn County Economic Development, but he also works at CBTC. She works in their foundation, so she does spend plenty of time working with businesses, and that was kind of the group of people that we were looking to get there. Jim Zahns, obviously representing the county board. Leanne Ralph is the town chair for Otter Creek. So she was there representing the municipalities in Dunn County. And we added late Terry Nichols, who is a retiree and a veteran, kind of representing that community in Dunn County. So our task was the deliverables that we were supposed to do were to create a vision, set goals, and make recommendations. So that's kind of what you're going to get out of that report and what I'm going to go over here as well. So to start us off, doesn't read well from across the screen, but I can get you a copy of that as well. So since about 2017, the state of Wisconsin has been giving out lots of grants as it relates to broadband. You may be familiar with the work that was done by a previous broadband committee in Dunn County to do some survey and to really identify issues and how to go forward. The work that that group did was amazing and had a wonderful impact on broadband in Dunn County. And one of the ways that we know that is Dunn County was awarded more grants from the state of Wisconsin than any other county in the state of Wisconsin by about 5. So, and so that work has been great. As you look through that report and you look at where these grants were awarded, there's a direct correlation happening there. So I think that just goes to show how some of that work and how that planning can have an impact as we go forward. I do want to point out in the upper left-hand corner, I got to do some custom editing to this map because the towns of Tiffany and New Haven received a grant just like 3 weeks ago. So that was a serving, I believe it's 557. There's a press release coming out. Don't tell anybody. So related to that, there was 4 other grants in Dunn County that were not awarded, but it still kind of goes. There was 20 grants awarded in this most recent round in Dunn County. Once again, got 1 more of them. So, so just goes to show there's been a lot of work, and I think it's Dunn County is representative of a county that is going to have problems expanding broadband without some assistance. Moving forward, this slide kind of shows you the timeline of the BEAD grant. So BEAD stands for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. It is one of the grant programs that is coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, otherwise known as bill. The state of Wisconsin is currently creating their own application to the federal government to get the funds for the state of Wisconsin. Once they get that, then they will provide grant opportunities within the state, similar to the previous grant programs that have happened. They're expecting between 700 million and 1.2 billion as the state of Wisconsin's kind of piece of that larger pie. So that, and then you can see the timeline there. So letter of intent, we are coming up on the August deadlines, the August 2023 deadlines of the submitting of the 5-year state action plan. So a lot of the plannings that we are doing right here in the grant that the county received for BEAD planning is related to providing the state of Wisconsin with Dunn County's planning efforts to be included in the 5-year plan. So that's kind of where we are right there. After that, then the state would get awarded their piece of the pie, and in 2024 is when we'll start to see the grant opportunities and those programs start to come to be. So that is, and this is not my timeline, that is the Public Service Commission's timeline. So moving on, I'm going to minimize this. Another slide that doesn't show well in this big screen. They look really great on my computer right in front of me. So the plan structure, and so this is relating to the document that you have and kind of how that's put together and what we're talking about when we say creating a plan in order to do that. A lot of time spent on, what is a plan as we talk about creating visions and goals and all of that. Technically, if you look up what a plan is the steps that you take in order to meet a goal, which was odd that we were going to create goals as part of a plan because it's kind of backwards. So let's just think of this as the parent plan that consists of multiple goals. So the first thing that we did was part of this was related to the BEAD planning grant as a requirement, but it also a nice place to start is to identify that vision. So what does this look like in the end? So what does a connected Dunn County look like? And so that we'll get to the vision there. So then once we've identified what our vision is, we need to identify where we are now so that we can go on and identify what those barriers are to get us from where we are to where we want to be. So as we talk to the barriers, we're not talking about the one on the board here. We're talking about those things, those obstacles that we have to get over. The goals are those things that need to be done in order to overcome those barriers in order to get to our vision. The recommendations that we provided are essentially from the task force telling the county, these are some ways that you could go about accomplishing those goals or things that you need to do in order to accomplish those goals. Moving on, the next item in the plan, it goes over the survey. So you're familiar that we did a survey. And part of that survey was identifying where we are now. But part of that is also one of our goals is that we need to have good data in order to be able to do that. And so part of the survey was actually just getting started on part of that plan. And then finally a conclusion. So there's somewhat the sections that are within that plan and how that is all structured. So first things first, the vision. A long sentence. I think it's actually two. And this really came up with the task force brainstorming about all of the different items that are important and that will be affected by broadband. So all Dunn County citizens should have access to affordable broadband that is reliable, fast, future-proof to support our senior students, businesses, and career professionals to participate in school, work, healthcare, entertainment, and society. Broadband for all will grow the Dunn County economy, educate students, and lead to a healthy and more fulfilling life. So kind of a blanket statements, lots of lists inside of there of who those audiences are that we are looking to impact and how we see that in the future. So that is the vision that we came up with. And now we kind of come up with those barriers. So as we look through that, say, all right, how do we get from here to there and where we are? So one of the big items in there is access. So the term access is really talking about the wire that's going to plug somebody in, right? So it's more the infrastructure side of getting access to the internet or getting access to high-speed internet. One of the areas that we cover, and there's a section of it in the plan, is the definition of unserved and underserved. And I shouldn't say the definition. There are multiple definitions of unserved and underserved. Even the state can't decide. There is one written into state statute, but it isn't typically the one used. And we typically are using the definition that BEAD uses. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law defines unserved and underserved. And that is using 100 by 20 is the way they would talk to it. And so that's 100 meg download, 20 up as the speed. Previous definitions had that much lower. And so that is a kind of a welcome change that's been requested by many for a long time. So that's going to have some significant changes as we look at the grant programs going forward, as there's a lot of people in Dunn County that were maybe meeting those old standards that were defined as served with high-speed internet, but the people who had that would disagree. So that's a big piece as we talk about access, is getting access to broadband is what we're talking about, not necessarily just getting access to the internet. In order to kind of solve that problem, we need to know where it is and where it isn't. And so that was part of that survey and some of those and ongoing efforts as we go there. It's hard for us to identify where we need to advocate for broadband if we don't know where that could be. And then we need to know who are the providers in the areas that they provide. And that's some interesting data to discover. We are familiar with where providers got grants. We are not familiar with where they have covered on their own. And you know, they've done a wonderful job in covering certain areas, but they also do keep some of that close to their chest. That is a you know, part of their business model and part of the competition. They don't want others to know where they are necessarily. So so we need to go about that in other ways in working with them. So those are a few of the issues that we see as far as getting people access to the internet. I guess what's not on there is like money, but I think that's implied, right? That it is not cost effective for providers to provide internet to rural citizens. It's just not. It needs to be supplemented in some way. The second area is adoption. And the term adoption in this particular scenario means people choosing to connect to the internet. So just because it's at their doorstep doesn't mean that they want that. And that might be because they don't understand the value. It may be that they can't afford it. We'll get into that. And it may just be that they don't even know that it's available. So there's lots of different reasons why that would happen. But adoption is also important as we talk about providers being able to go there. If they're not going to get high, they call them take rates. They're not going to get a high take rate. They're not going to put fiber there. They need to get a certain number of subscribers down that path of fiber in order to make it worth their while. So if we can increase adoption, that makes the market more favorable for providers to go in there. So a lot of these things are all somewhat interrelated. And the final one is affordability. Affordability is a big piece of that. Another one of those slides that's way too small to read. This particular slide is the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's a federal program that provides a $30 discount each month to the provider for people. Essentially, if they qualify for free or reduced lunches, they're automatically qualified for the Affordable Connectivity Program. There's multiple different ways to qualify for that in other areas out there. Dunn County has, I'm trying to read it from here. I believe that's like 2,066 people subscribed. It's a good number of people that have taken part in this. But you can also see some of our neighboring counties around there that, you know, we're not necessarily doing our best, and that's part of that advocacy program in there. And then the other piece of it is that particular program's funding is going to run out. It was funded through some, I don't know if it was part of ARPA, but it was certainly some sort of COVID funding that provided that funding, and it's about to run out. And so there's a lot of people there that affordability is going to become a bigger issue. So once again, that affordability comes down to that adoption, which comes down to access, because it's not worth providing it. So a lot of these things intertwine in different ways, but all are reasons that people that make it difficult for us to get fiber out. And once again, those obstacles that we need to overcome. So moving on, I'm sticking with the slides that are hard to read. The goals and recommendations. So in the plan, in the written out plan, there's much more information related to that. There are 7 goals. So as you look at this particular chart, on the left, you see the goal. In the middle is that barrier. So that really that item that either the access, affordability, or adoption type struggle that we had identified, and what this is. So this goal is written to overcome that particular barrier, and then that recommendation is maybe more of a how you would go about meeting that goal. Some of the goals are pretty clear that the recommendation and the goal are almost the same. Some of them are not quite as clear. The goals are specifically written out to follow the principles of SMART goals. So, so they're attainable, time bound, all the other things that start with SMART. And so it's really kind of looking at, these are some of the things that you need to do, but like, for example, the first goal says provide at least biannually passive awareness efforts demonstrating the advantages of having broadband. So that's, coming up with fancy words to essentially say, so these people who have decided that broadband isn't something that they need in their life, right? We could put together a training at a school and invite them all to come and see why they want broadband. They're not likely to show up. They've already kind of made that decision. And so that's where some of that passive marketing. So, where is that sign or something? Maybe I see something in the news or I see something like that that helps me understand that, oh, hey, I can actually get telehealth from my home without having to drive in, or I can do some of these to see some of those benefits. So what can we do in order to help with that particular audience? As much as that's the first goal on there, I wouldn't call it maybe the most important one. It's just the order that they were in. So, but that's kind of, as we talk about that and as we talk about the recommendation, is more of that, hey, this is a way that we can do this, or maybe a further description of what we meant by that goal. The second goal is in the next 6 months, develop an information hub for residents of Dunn County to learn more about broadband options and how to get connected. One of the things that we learned through our surveying, people don't necessarily know which providers are at their house and how they would get connected and what they would do. So I mean, the providers are out there. They have information. If you would call them, they would tell you everything you need to know, but you need to know to call them. So we had kind of envisioned this idea of an information hub that's storing a lot of that information and can help route people to the right directions. Obviously, that would require some marketing as well, but it allows a way for people to get access to the information that they need. The next one is to provide a way to train individuals to make them more comfortable managing their home internet. Oh, I got a typo. Within the next 2 years. I had like 4 people proofread it. So, this particular goal is related to adoption, that there are plenty of people, once again, some of those people that have chosen that they don't need internet, but a lot of that it's just a lack of comfort. It may not be understanding, but it's, why would I spend this money? I'm not going to be able to figure it out, right? So how can we help those people become comfortable in doing that? And so some of that might be training, but some of that might be working with others to identify support avenues for people in managing their home network. If you have a home network, every once in a while the internet doesn't work and you have to restart the router. That's just a step that we learn as we do that. But those are things that you don't know unless somebody told you. I pretty much have a career because of it, right? So, the next goal is to develop or participate in a program to assist residents with getting access to devices necessary to interact with the internet within the next 3 years. Lots of words in that one. So this is once again related to kind of affordability and adoption. And that is, it's one thing to be connected to the internet. You need a computer or some other type of device, and also relates to the previous goal, and you need to know how to use it. And this is, even as you look at the recommendation, is to follow a similar model to what Eau Claire County is doing to assist. So I mean, so some of these problems are being solved. Some of the work is being done nearby, and we just need to expand those programs or work with them in order to do that. And they're working with the United Way and Chippewa, the Chippewa Valley to provide that service. So, next one, maintain and evolve maps of the county, identifying unserved and underserved areas through gathering data from federal, state, and regional partners and ongoing surveying of residents. So this comes back to that survey and having maps and knowing where our problems are and where our providers are and contributing to that whole area. Next goal over the next year, identify potential providers to partner with to cover areas of need. Additionally, identify a process to equitably evaluate projects and partnerships with providers. Kind of goes without saying, but we need to, the grants are awarded to our providers. And so we can know where there's issues, and we need to work with them in order to do that. Sneak peek into the future, we're in the presentation. I mean, we're running into areas where providers are getting close to each other, right? Where they're both going to be interested in covering the same area. And so we need to work with them in order to identify who is the best provider to get this coverage, because if they both provide, or if they both apply to a grant for the same location, the likelihood is nobody gets it. So it's an extreme challenge, but working with the providers and kind of being forthright and equitable is important. And I think the current practice is in Dunn County is if the providers ask for us to partner with them, we say yes, and we give them some money. And that's great. We shouldn't necessarily say no, but but we also need to be thinking about that and understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And once again, this is where I come in as the recommendations go a little bit deeper into what I'm saying. The goals are somewhat vague in how you might go about that. And finally, in the next year, work with providers to understand the upfront costs for potential new subscribers. With that information, develop a plan to eliminate or minimize the impacts of upfront costs on adoption rates. So if you're not familiar with how this works, they will put a fiber to the end of your road. And let's say you have a 1 mile driveway. You're going to have a very high cost to run fiber down your driveway. And with a lot of these grants, they supplement that where you would just maybe pay a one-time fixed fee of, let's just throw $200 out there. So now all of a sudden somebody knocks on your door one day and says, hey, you have $200 so that you can pay $110 a month for internet. And somebody says, no, I don't. And so then they don't do it. And then a year later they say, oh, you know what? Now I want the internet. Well, now I have to go pay $4,000 to run fiber down my driveway. So, because that's the cost, they have to bring the equipment over there. They have to buy the supplies. They have to do that. So as they're going from door to door to door, it's more cost effective for them to run that fiber at that time. But people may not be in a position to be able to afford that at the time. And so that was an area that we identified from an adoption standpoint. And even as we talk about those people who may not be interested in the internet, like, can we still just get fiber to your house here quick while they're here? So what's a way that we can kind of overcome that particular obstacle that had been identified by some people? So, and frankly, I think that's something that the providers would be happy to to do. I mean, they have costs and they're just happy to get people connected. And even if it was to get that person that wasn't quite sure, you got them one step closer. So those are the main 7 goals to work at. Sorry, I gotta go back. I feel like I'm missing a slide. Maybe I'm gonna get to it later. We'll see. Otherwise, I'll just go ad hoc. Survey results. So this particular map is a heat map. You'd think heat would be like red is warm and blue is cold, but just flip it over. So these are areas, the areas that you're seeing in blue are essentially density of responses to people who say they did not have access to the internet. And so my big takeaway as we did this, right, is you look at this map, you can see some particular areas here that are of concern. And then we move on to the next map. And it's kind of funny how where the grants have been awarded, we don't have problems. And so I mean that just goes to show the value of those grant programs and as they've come in. And the next one shows, it's really hard to see because there's a light green color. So this corner up here, you can kind of see the green in here. That's that grant that was awarded a couple weeks ago. My favorite one, the grant over here in Grant, did not get awarded. But once again, that green area is just covering one of those hot spots that the survey had identified. Right here in the town of Lucas, another area that was lit up bright blue, another grant that did not get awarded. And when I say the grant didn't get awarded, it wasn't because it's not a good grant or anything like that. There was like 150 applicants for $20 million, 20 were awarded. So the grant in Grant was number 30 out of the 150. So it was just 10 away from getting awarded. And then there is another one over here in O'Galley, and there is another one right here in the town of Colfax that were not adopted, and they all correspond directly with areas of port coverage. So what that really goes to show you is that the providers, they know they know where they need to cover. We now know where they need to cover. And so we just need to kind of, once again, work with them in order to identify where that's going to go. The other area that we really need to look at is this Sherman Hay River area here. Obviously, there's some lacking of coverage right here. The town of Tainer received a grant from one provider. Otter Creek, a different provider. Tiffany, Hay River, a third provider. Another provider is over here in Boyceville. And the first provider, same as Tainer, is over here in Stanton.
What about the southern part of it? We're actually pretty good service.
Right in here. Yeah, so right through here, well, 24/7 Telecom is headquartered out of Downsville, so you can imagine who that provider is that's covering right here. There is yeah, a little corridor right here. So there's a company out of Durand, NTech, that is providing some coverage down here in the southern part of the county. So so you are seeing a little bit of competition kind of happening in in that area as well. This is an area that my assumption is that 24/7 telecom is covered without grant funding. I think it's part of their original area and all of that. So, so yeah, so this is another area that, as I had mentioned, there's a lot of providers, and we're kind of at this intersection of, all right, who's here and who should be here.
So I don't know if you know this number, but how much were the grants for that didn't get funded? know?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get them for you.
So, I mean, is $1.2 billion enough to cover all these gaps throughout the state?
No.
No, so still gonna be competitive and hope, we have to just hope funding keeps coming.
There's been some preliminary guesstimates that it's about $8 billion worth of coverage, or dollars needed to cover the state.
And I think that's where preparation on our part is going to be best for Dunn County. May not be the best for everybody in the state of Wisconsin, but but it would be the best for Dunn County. And I think that's the importance of this work, is to get this information out here, work with these people, get your good grant, the best grant proposal that we can get out there so that ours are on the top of the list. All right. Hey, yeah, I did have the final recommendation. So, the final recommendation, there wasn't really goals related to this, but I think as we looked at the previous plan that was put out and how the county would move forward, once again, there was great work done in that previous plan, but there wasn't people to carry it out. And for various reasons, there wasn't. And we put together a plan, we put together goals, and we, from a task force standpoint, I think we know what needs to be done, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody has to be that champion that is going to be working with the providers, gathering that data, going to the meetings, and doing the work. And so that is the first kind of overall recommendation. In order to carry out this plan, you need to designate somebody to lead broadband. And that means allocating time for an employee or hiring some whatever, however that gets done, there needs to be a person. And they need to kind of have that authority to kind of move forward. The second recommendation is to create a broadband committee. So in the past, the CRNT committee had been deemed the broadband committee. But as we kind of work through some of the recommendations and things like that, as a committee leads that committee needs to have a wide range of stakeholders, needs to represent different industries in the county, and have a much more wider range than no offense to the 5 people on this committee, but you work where you work and you're members of the board, but do you represent education and healthcare and all of these different industries that have a huge stake in broadband? So our recommendation is to create a committee for broadband, modeling it on the Eau Claire County Broadband Committee. One of the founding members of that committee is actually a resident of Dunn County, and he was the former CIO at Eau Claire County. And he met with our group and kind of talked through how that committee worked. And so we're somewhat modeling a recommendation related to that. And that committee would really be in charge of identifying that criteria that you would use to determine which projects the county is behind, in a process for how that's going to be done. And they can work to identify different funding options and how you're going to go about once again, carrying out that plan to meet those goals. Once again, a lot of the work is going to be done by the designee, but one of the things that was also brought up as it relates to these committee members, and we put the word in there of passionate members, and that was one of the recommendations, is that those members need to be strong advocates for broadband, that they will go out and do some of that work. They will go have those conversations with the providers and advocate for this work. And I think, yeah, that was the last slide. So that is the broadband plan in a nutshell. Are there any questions?
And you're submitting this by when? Because I,
To the Public Service
Yes.
Commission yesterday.
yesterday.
It's due on Monday and I'm going out of town tomorrow. So,
So this report fulfills our the requirement of that grant. Is that-
well, yes, sorry, the grant, the planning grant required that we meet a group to create a vision, set goals, and reach out to stakeholders. It did not require that we created a plan. I made the plan out of all of those other pieces. So I provided the plan to demonstrate that we were doing the work to plan. We didn't even have to be done with it. We just had to be working on it. So when I say I submitted the plan, it isn't like this is signed, sealed, and delivered. It's a demonstration that we are making work towards planning broadband in Dunn County, which was the requirement of the grant.
So does your committee hear back from the state to see like how it was incorporated into their 5-year plan at all?
We will. I will likely hear. I mean, they're not. I don't expect them to say, "Hey, Dunn County said this," right? But they're going to say, you know, this many counties have come up and developed a plan and surveyed their this and done all of this different work in order to demonstrate that we are prepared to go out and do this, and we understand where our problems are and why we want to solve them. But I think the bigger work, I mean, part of it is feeding that 5-year plan. Frankly, I believe the state had 90% of the 5-year plan built. Our deliverables are due next Monday. Their deliverable is due to the federal government like 3 weeks later. So I did want to focus as we wrote that plan on what is something that Dunn County can follow as we move forward, while also kind of checking the boxes for the planning grant. So and it's again, that is kind of the deliverable the task force had wanted. We have those recommendations out there. You can't take action on them today, but I think to think about that, and Chris and I have had discussions related to how specifically the allocating of resources can be done. Creating a committee is oddly very easy to do. I believe it just requires Kelly to say there shall be a committee. So I guess I would just leave that to say, you know, absorb that. I know I gave you a day to read it.
And is the broadband task force then complete,
We are complete.
done?
Yes.
You're headed off on your vacation, all of you together to like Aruba or something?
No, just me alone to golf.
What? I thought I was coming with. I also, I just want to give some kudos and thanks to Dan for leading the broadband task force. He did a lot of heavy lifting, corralled a lot of people, kept the meetings running really well, and put a lot of great effort into not only the PowerPoint you just saw, but also the the final report, which you can take some time to read. And the survey results are really interesting. And it's interesting seeing all those spots that are not served by providers, and you can really see where those grants have made a huge impact on some of the areas that are covered. So and you know, if this is an item that hopefully maybe at our next monthly CRNT committee meeting, we can look at maybe adopting or maybe having an action item related to the broadband committee, or adopting some of the recommendations in the task force. But thanks again, Dan.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. All right.
Anybody has any questions about survey data or anything like that? I do more.
All right, so we'll move back to number 5A. So that's the area extension director report.
Thank you. In your packet, you've received the annual report, the 2022 annual report for extension. So at this, I'm not going to go through it, obviously. So if you have any questions about that report, I can certainly entertain them now. Otherwise, you know, just contacting the office at a later time or the educators directly on some of the report items. I wanted to bring that to your attention that has been submitted. And so I'll be doing a presentation to the board based on this annual report next week. Okay. So if there's any questions or suggestions with that report, we'd be happy to hear about those as well. It'll be my first time, but I understand that hasn't happened in the last few years.
That's correct.
So I won't seem as new.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for all the hard work. It's amazing what was in there.
Yes, that's kudos to well, Michelle formally, and then Melissa came in and finished her up. So, and then of course, all of the work of the educators and you know, what their work throughout the year. So, but other than that, Melissa and I have been working on the budget. We'll be bringing that forward in August, which I do have a conflict with the date for the CRT for this committee. So I'll probably talk with Chair about that coming up, but I will be out of, I do have vacation during that time. So, and not connected. I know that was the other piece. So, so I'll talk about maybe some options with that moving forward, but we'll be doing that in August and bringing that budget forward. So we've been working on that. Other than that, I don't have any updates. Unless the staff has anything to add.
Did anyone have questions about the financial report? All right, thank you. So did anyone have questions about the written educators report that was in the packet? All right, so then we move on to the presentation. So it's Jerry Clark. And is it Lissa Seafelt? So can take it away. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. All right. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. And we just wanted to quickly go through a few things. As you know, or may have heard, an extension for what we call Area 6 is Chippewa, Dunn, and Eau Claire County. So we have offices in all those locations. Jerry is out of the Chippewa office, and I am primarily located in the Eau Claire office. So if you're not familiar with those buildings, that's the kind of the front of the buildings or where people are generally accessing them. And Extension's mission is really to connect people with the University of Wisconsin. We're really the kind of embodiment of the Wisconsin idea. So that's what we like to always try to uphold in any of our programs that we're doing, really bringing that research from the university back to the communities that we serve in. As you may be familiar with, we do have a horticulture educator, Margaret Murphy. Myself, I do dairy programming, and then we have Jerry Clark, who does crops and soils. And I just wanted to go through a little bit of data to kind of ground us in some of the reasons why Jerry and I do what we do. And so we're looking back to primarily the 2017 Census of Agriculture, because that is our most current data set that we have available to us. For kind of a whole snapshot. Unfortunately, the new data that was being collected this last year is being tabulated right now and should be available for us next year. So next year we might be able to have an update of this, but this kind of gives you a snapshot of where the county has maybe been for the last couple of years, to just kind of help ground some of the things that we've been doing recently. So what does the Census of Agriculture really cover? It's done every 5 years. And so it's just a count of the US farms and ranches that are present, and the people that are on them. Even small plots of land are covered under this. So anybody that's doing any kind of growing of produce, producing livestock, that sort of thing. So a farm is defined in the census as a place that has produced or sold at least $1,000 of agricultural product in the Census of Agriculture year. So that's the definition. Pretty small amount to really be counted as a farm.
Small potatoes.
Small potatoes, yes. So we're going to dive in a little bit closer and look at some of the Dunn stats now. So this chart is really to kind of show you some of the trends that have been occurring in the county for the past 10 years, from 2007 to 2017. And as you can see, the number of farms has decreased. The land in farm, the number of acres there has also been decreasing. And that for Dunn County means that our average farm size has actually increased a little bit. So our farms have gotten slightly bigger. So when we look at our farms by size, you can see that we have a nice distribution here. A lot of different representation in the various categories. So we have some small farms, we have some medium-sized farms, and then we have some very large farms. So the other little chart in the top right there is just to kind of show you what percentage of the total number of farms represents each category. The colors do match up from one chart to the other. And then if we look at farms by sales, this kind of shows you the breakdown of how much these farms are actually producing. So you can see that we have a lot of small farms that are producing less than $2,500 worth of product. So those are going to be our small hobby farms that maybe are selling things here and there, but it's probably not going to be their main practice. And then on the complete opposite side of the chart, on the right-hand side, the more than $100,000 worth of product, those are going to be some of our larger farms, probably dairy farms that are producing milk on a regular basis and in relatively speaking, large quantities. And again, the chart on the top right is going to be showing you that representation on a percentage basis. I know we're going through a lot of numbers very quickly. Just trying to keep on time here. So irrigated land in Dunn County ends up being about 12% of the farmable land. So wanted you to be aware of that. That is higher than in some counties, lower than others. So in the mix. Cropping acres. These are the top 5 crops that are produced in the county. So we have corn for silage or green chop, primarily for cattle feed, corn for grain, Dry edible beans, that's a rather unique kind of niche one because we have some of that infrastructure in the area, right? And then we have forage in the form of hay and haylage, again, primarily used for cattle feed, and then soybeans. And you can see the numbers there. If we look at our livestock inventory by animal number, we do have some layer chickens as a fairly sizable number on here. And if you look at our cattle and calves number in the middle of that chart in blue, it's starred. And the reason it's starred is because that number is actually off the chart. I tried to be able to show our other numbers a little bit better. So I kind of cropped the chart at the top. So just know that that actually extends out a little bit further than that. Because if you notice on the left-hand side, our scale only goes to 30,000. So that gives you a little snapshot of livestock inventory by the various species numbers. And then we can also take a look at that by inventory by number of farms producing each species. So we still have quite a few that are in the poultry side of things on the left-hand side of the chart. But really our big powerhouse when you look at the actual number of farms is beef cattle. Just the number of farms, there's a lot of smaller beef operations. So they do tend to outnumber our dairy farms these days, but the dairy farms still tend to bring in more income. So just as a kind of FYI on that. And then we also have our other livestock species, goats, hogs and pigs, sheep, horses and ponies. The little asterisk on the horses and ponies is that there's actually a lot more operations that have horses, but they're not money makers. They're generally not selling them. They're usually pasture ornaments. So when we're talking about farm income, the numbers that are on this slide are going to be just looking at our averages for the county. So if we look at an average, the market value of the product sold ends up being 165,326. If we look at our production expenses, we lose a whole bunch of what we just made, right? And so when we look at the net cash farm income, each farm ends up on average netting 38,385. So that is actually down 32% since 2012. It'll be interesting to see what that number looks like with the next set of census data. With COVID in the mix and just repercussions with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that number looks in the next set of data. For farm labor, about a quarter of the farms are actually hiring help. So off the farm, non-family help. If we look at our demographic data, one thing that the census changed recently in the last couple of censuses, looking at how they're capturing the primary operators. It used to be that there was a certain primary operator, and now it's up to 4 primary operators per farm. So it's doing a little bit better job capturing partnerships, husband-wife kind of situations, family partnerships, all those kinds of things. And so we're seeing a little bit more clearly what our number of primary operators are as we're getting more of that data in the next few censuses here. As you can see, our average farmer age is still kind of one of those increasing numbers. Our 65 and older population is 30%, and our 35 to 64 is 60%. If they put a split in a different spot, based on what we know from our average farmer age in the last census, our average farmer age was probably around 55 to 56. So that 60% is a little bit misleading if we look at where the split might be for our younger farmers. So just know that. And then you can see our breakdown of operators with their different races and ethnicity on the right-hand side. Sometimes we get questions about organic. In Dunn County, there's 2% organic farms here. So that's over twice the nationwide average. And that's just a general, most of Wisconsin has that trend. We have higher percentages of organic here, probably because we have the infrastructure to support it. Direct sales to consumers, 7%. Internet access ties in nicely with what we were just talking about. Here in Dunn County, farms with internet access is 82%. That is higher than some of the other counties that I serve. Kudos to the committee and everybody that's been involved with getting broadband access out to people that is showing up in the census data as well. So nice to see. And one thing that often throws people off when they hear this number, the percentage of family-owned farms for the county is 96%. So oftentimes people think, we've lost all the family farms, and no, we haven't. They just look a little different than they used to. So briefly going to go through kind of setting the dairy stage, what we're thinking about programming here as we're moving into the regional model and having me do more work in Chippewa Dunn in addition to Eau Claire. So when we look at some data, this would be data from the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. Some of the recent statistics that have come from a report there. The 2021 Wisconsin average of milk per cow was somewhere just under 25,000 pounds. And you can see Dunn County is like right about where that average is. So that's great. That kind of tells us that we're kind of keeping up with that average in Wisconsin. Chippewa and Dunn are a little bit, Chippewa and Eau Claire are a little bit of a different story. So that may lead into some programming just based on that little fact right there. When we look at our herd size in the Northwest region, the StatCap survey is from 2020, and it kind of shows us the Northwest region has a fairly large area and it covers a large portion of the Northwoods. So we may have a little bit of a skewed data set just because of that. It's going to skew our numbers most likely a little bit smaller because there's less infrastructure in those northern counties. So a little bit smaller on herd size there. But if we then go back into our 2017 census data to really look at dairy farms by size, in Dunn County, you can kind of see our primary number of farms that are operating or somewhere in that 50 to 99 head. But we do have farms all the way up to 500 plus. So we have some what would be considered CAFOs on down to some small farms on the other side of things. This chart is just looking at milk production in the million number of pounds by county. So you can kind of see it's just basically a heat map to kind of give you a little bit of a visual representation of what that looks like across the state. Some of the eastern side of the state is actually darker because they just have so many more cows than we do over here. So when I'm looking at developing dairy programming for the area, we have some kind of core offerings that we really work with from the state. We have a handful of dairy educators across the state. So we oftentimes collaborate on projects because we just need to rely on each other. And so some of those kind of core projects that we've developed that we plug our counties into is we have an online series called Badger Dairy Insight. So that's morphing into a monthly series for us. So that'll be ongoing. We'll be picking that back up in the fall here. We do have a dairy program e-newsletter. So if you're interested in getting on that, do let me know. We'll get you connected if you're not already. We produce videos. There's some online Canvas courses, other webinars. We also have a Area 6 Extension of the Valley newsletter. And those are kind of some of the core, a lot of the online stuff that we do. Then of course we will offer things in person, and as we're able to, we're going to partner in with on-farm research. So that's kind of the core of what we're looking at doing. And this is a big messy chart of lots of different things that we could potentially do based on farmer and other interested parties, what we're really seeing for needs. So everything from animal welfare and herd health, all the way through reproduction and genetics, lots of different things that we can cover to really help get our farmers in that continual movement towards economic viability and sustainability. And so that ends my section, and Jerry's got a couple of slides that he wanted to go through as well.
Well, thanks. Again, Jerry Clark and based in, oops. New technology. Try that a little better. Thank you. So most of our work is in the agronomy field with crops and soils, but agronomy is just the study of crops. So that's kind of where most of my programming lies. And so we've done a lot of different things over my career, and I guess I've been around going on 25 years. The anniversary is coming up in a couple of weeks here. So I should get something silver, right? Isn't that the 25th anniversary? Anyway, field crop production, again, those major crops that are out there, we've done quite a bit of on-farm research with those over time. Emerging crops, again, something new that we're been doing over the last, I would say the last 5 to 10 years. We've kind of looked at those emerging crops, or again, that little piece of the economic pie where there's a smaller farm that might be interested in growing a specialty crop. So we've looked at, hops, hemp, rice, malting barley. Those have been kind of the focus the last few years. The nutrient pest management, most of my work's been on the nitrogen side of things. I don't know, Dunn County do they have a groundwater study? I know Chippewa County's got a huge database of nitrate well testing. And that's been a focus over the last 6 or 7 years, is on-farm research on nitrogen rates. We kind of tie in what's going on with groundwater irrigation. About 10% of your land's under irrigation. So maybe some on-farm research or programming that might focus on that nitrogen nitrate management within primarily corn production. Climate change, we've kind of messed around a little bit with that in terms of not maybe research, so to speak, but the educational programming. When we get new data from UW-Madison or they have an outreach program, farmers love to talk about the weather. So it's great to kind of tie what's happening, changes they've seen. We just had something the other day. We called it, the climatologist at UW-Madison called it weather whiplash. So we went from flooding, not getting in the field on May 1st, to a drought, basically, almost. We're abnormally dry. But depending where you are, your crops were already starting to suffer. So climate change is something that I've talked about to maybe some of the public, some of the nonprofits, organizational groups. They kind of like to have those types of talks where you can kind of put the agriculture side aside a little bit and just talk about the weather. And most people like to do that. Grain marketing, working with some of the farm management specialists to put a Canvas course together on that. So that's kind of ramping up here in the next month, that will hopefully get that out. And then Extension in the Valley, like Lissa said, that's our new newsletter. I think we were on issue 3, just went out this last Monday. So that's one we're trying to get to farmers, and maybe down the road we can make that printable to mail to those underserved, maybe the Amish Mennonite communities in the whole area, because we've got large communities in Eau Claire and Chippewa for that as well. We have a Badger Crop Connect and a focus on forage type of programming as well. Those are webinar series that occur throughout the growing season, and then again early winter. And then we have done a podcast series. So if you're into podcasts, we've done the Cutting Edge, again, kind of back to that new cropping system type of thing. And I think we've got about 40 or 45 different episodes out there. So you can find that on, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts, whatever they like to say. So, and then again, back to the kind of those local events. Again, we've done a number of different deliverables, whether it's during the growing season in the field, field day type of things, workshops, as well as classroom style types of things. So this is what's going on this winter, this summer, this growing season. So we get lots of things going on within the major crops, as well as some of the emerging crops. But these are scattered throughout Chippewa and Eau Claire counties. And I think the focus for Dunn County would be, is there something that, as Lissa and I do some needs assessments, is there something here that we're already doing that Dunn would see benefit from? Again, coming on in March, these things were already on the table. It's hard to add too much more to the plate, but as some of these things come off, we'd like to, personally, I'd like to see the Dunn County, Eau Claire, Chippewa ones. If we had similar sites across, similar projects across the 3 counties, that really strengthens the database for on-farm research. So we have these things called site years. And so the more sites you have and the more years you have, the data becomes that much stronger. So that adaptive nitrogen management for corn production, that's one where we're in like year 6. And so we've had a number of sites across the state, 6 of them in Chippewa County. And that just strengthens that database as we keep looking at those nitrogen rates, especially in corn production. So lots of different things going on. But that I just want to give you a snapshot of some of the things we've done in Chippewa specifically, because that's where I've been located for most of my career. But did pick up a few of these in Eau Claire County since we were connected on a couple projects that were spread across the state this last year. So that's kind of my snapshot. And again, located in Chippewa County, try to get over here when we can. But if there's something going on, questions, reach out. I know Melissa's really good about sending us the phone calls and emails, and we have no problem doing site visits, one-on-one to help solve a problem if we need to. So I think that's all I got too. So any questions?
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? All right, go ahead. The other one. Right, there you go.
Turn it on, not off. So yeah, yeah. Okay. I think I got it. After all these years. Thanks. That was really interesting information. So the question of number of farms, just want to, if you could, like in my area, the trend over the past, especially the past 5, 6, 7 years has been that we're seeing ambitious operators expand their number of acres that they operate. They may have started with a home farm of 400 acres, especially if they moved away from dairy and animals and into grain. And now they're, renting thousands of acres. How big is their farm?
Well, that's probably a good question, and it's going to be a standard extension answer of it
Yeah.
depends on the operator. Really, I think there's 2 ways that farms have maintained some economic viability. As you're mentioning, there's some that have chose the path of really getting good at one thing that they know how to do, and so they've figured out how to pencil out the numbers to make that work for them. And another potential route that some other farms take is to figure out ways to carve out a kind of direct funding for themselves. So things like direct marketing of meat, or figuring out how to do an on-farm cheese stead or something like that. So those are kind of the 2 different routes.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's needed and important. But what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is trying to understand how the structure of our ag economy is changing over time. And if we say we have so many, I can't remember the numbers now, but so many farms and the average size is 340 acres, something like that. How does the fact that we now have this new farming model where operators are some very good and ambitious and entrepreneurial operators have decided that their survival approach is to get very big and to rent as much land as they can. At least it seems like that's what's going on. Maybe I'm overstating it, but then how do we measure? How do you think about how big that farm is? Is that farm as big as the acreage they rent, or is it as big as the acreage they own?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. And I haven't looked into Dunn County, but 50% of the land in Chippewa County is rented.
Right.
So I know if that, you can get that number through Farm Service Agency, even your land conservation department with their programs, because farmers will enroll in those kind of things. So I think you look at the farm size based on, the Farm Service Agency, when they report their acreage, they may have these smaller farms designated as a farm. So if they pick up 200 acres of new land from the farmer that they rent, that's still treated as a separate farm.
Right.
In the
Okay.
view of the feds.
Yeah.
So that's why this number from USDA can be kind of
Yeah.
a little, I'm not saying they're throwing darts at the wall, but it's kind of that way because you're seeing that how are those larger farms dividing up that land that you're
Yeah.
just, they
No, and
just
it's,
picked up these
it's kind of a
acres.
matter, okay, what's happening with our ag economy and what do we want to have happen with our ag economy and how can we encourage, do we just leave it to whatever happens? Or do we try and shape policies that encourage certain kinds of,
And I
that's
think-
all, that's all.
Yeah, and I think you hit the word is policy. So the Farm Bill's coming out.
Yeah.
And right now, corn and soybeans have always had better programs than dairy or livestock. So when farmers, or just breaking down, they're ready to get out of dairy farming.
Right.
That seems to be the next step is, well, I'll keep farming, but it's going to be corn and beans or I'll rent it. And
That's what's happening.
that's
yeah.
the end of the
So-
risk. I'm out of the risk taking game. So.
And well, it's interesting. Now, the other thing that when the slide you showed about the number of beef farms. And that's clearly, as we've lost dairy farms, many of those farms have tried to adopt beef as a strategy. That's perhaps a little more intensive and value added. But I personally think that is a good option, a good strategy.
I was gonna say that may actually be showing some of the retired dairy farmers. They may be
Right.
getting out of dairy, but beef is a little bit less intensive than dairy. You don't have to be there.
And
all the
I'm
time.
encouraged to see that Extension has Kevin Schlossner is his name, or Schlosser? No. I know there's some Extension educator who's focusing on grazing.
Oh,
I think-
Kevin Seshaw.
Yeah.
Up in
right.
Spooner, yeah.
He's doing, I see he's got a bunch of really interesting workshops and stuff, but I didn't see any of that on the initiatives that we have in our area. And it's just, if we're talking about, is there something that we might want to consider in Dunn County? I think since we obviously have a lot of people going into dairy cattle or beef cattle, and you go out and you drive the roads and they're not all being managed in what I would consider to be a very good way, quite frankly. I mean, it's kind of haphazard and we could do a lot better. And we could do a lot better at marketing of that too. So just something to think about. I don't want to take up all the time, but since Larry's not here, I get to take up this time. Fair? Then as far as new crops go, I was kind of blown away by a presentation I saw and I can't think of his name again, but the extension agent up in Washburn.
Oh.
Or Bayfield County.
Jason
Yeah.
Fishbach.
The initiative around hazelnuts. And it was not just the crop itself, but the strategy they're using to develop that potentially valuable new crop in a way that retains the value in the local community. I mean, it's just an extension is heavily involved in that. And I was so happy to see that. And one of the things they're looking for are what they call these go first farms that are going to require a certain amount of investment and a certain amount of land, not a large amount of land, but at least 5 acres of land that can be secured for a long period of time. We have such land right behind our building here. And so I personally am interested in seeing whether or not there's some way to build some kind of a partnership around the interest that maybe some farmers in the county may have about exploring hazelnuts, with the county taking the initiative to provide this initial test plot where it could be developed.
Yep.
So just so you know that's.
Yeah, that's been one. And Chippewa County, we looked in it for when the sand mining was going, but for
Yeah.
reclamation. Could hazelnuts work as part of the sand mine reclamation
Right.
project? And so we've looked into that. Yeah, that initiative is still out there. Jason's done a great job of, now he's got the processing.
Yeah,
kind
he's got the
figured out.
process going. He was looking for money
Right.
and
So-
I was just really impressed.
Yeah, we can sure dovetail into that one.
Yeah, and there's potential for kind of some cross collaboration there too, because there's a thing called silvopasture, which is utilizing a woody
Yes.
perennial crop at the same time as grazing. So
Let's do
there's
that.
certainly opportunities to try different
Yeah.
things.
Thank you. That's all I have. Appreciate that.
Well, I had a couple questions. So how do you get those on-site, like research farms?
it-
Like, so do
well-
they come to you or do you?
A little of
recruit?
both. I think like the adaptive nitrogen management, that's under irrigation. So just finding a farm that's willing to put a small research plot, give us a spot. Sometimes there's an honorarium if there's a grant behind it. Other farmers are just interested that, yeah, let's find out type of thing. Some of these projects are on, Chippewa County also has some land similar to what you have here, where we've put those, a lot of like the hemp and the rice and the malting barley, some of those that a farmer just doesn't want to mess with. Well, hemp's regulated, so we have to get a license, and we just did that through the county. So those kind of things, the county has the land and it's pretty close to the office, so that makes it convenient that way. But with the land that is here, I think with the Chippewa Valley Technical College kind of helps coordinate some of that. And I've been in kind of in that planning group with Chase Cummings and that group that kind of look at the use of that land. We can continue to go down that path, and if there's something we want to try there, we can sure do it.
And, on the dairy side of things, that can be a little bit trickier because oftentimes studies that we might be doing in partnership with our state specialists have certain things that we need to be able to measure. And so if a farm doesn't have, for example, a scale, that might limit them from being a potential partner on a project because we need to record weights, or, there's a lot of different things. So some of it is going to be a little bit dependent on the project too.
Well, and I was a little saddened by the average income of the farms and the age. So is there succession planning webinars and like working with farmers so that it's just, they
Yeah,
just
and
don't go?
that farm management program, of course, you had Katie here for years, and that farm management program kind of still does that part of it. If it's a farmer that needs it, that have a relationship with or close enough, we may help get that discussion started, but oftentimes we turn it over to that farm management program to help. They're the experts.
Mhm. All right, any final questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So it looks like next is economic development update. Is that Chris? Did you have your summit?
Sure. So I just handed out just a summary as I tried to do each month. Much of our work that we've established early in the year with regard, these all just kind of roll together. So I know we have communication and economic development as items.
A and B.
Broadband, we've already tackled, so. Our communication efforts continue. And kind of noteworthy this month, Krista Vind did a video with Dustin Binder from the Highway Department on the County Road B project that's slated for this summer, and tossed it up on Facebook, and it's had over 1,900 views. So Dustin is taking requests for autographs and portraits with him, or pictures with him, selfies, that would be the word. But yeah, so that all that communication stuff continues. On the economic development side, in answer to Ann's question, we did hold day one of our summit on May 18th, and the second day will be on June 22nd. We had 12 key stakeholders, and it was kind of by invite and purposeful to keep the group to manageable size. Representatives you can see in the report. It was a great morning. We met from 8 till 11. It was a lot of really good, not to be too out there, but a lot of really good energy in the room, a lot of good discussion. Sort of serendipitously, Ashley Demuth from the chamber couldn't attend, so she had two of her board members, Ryan Martin, who works at ConAgra, and Stanley Chucky, who is at Anderson Windows, and they were amazing contributors because they were able to speak from the chamber side as well as the manufacturing side. So very good conversation, and we will meet again on the 22nd of June to finalize sort of the things we identified and where we might start to work more closely together as groups. But it was a very fun and engaging morning. And then as Dan alluded to, you recall some months back, we allocated up to $100,000 of additional ARPA money for the broadband expansion grants, and Next Gen was awarded a grant to run fiber to 7 businesses and 577 residential locations in New Haven and Tiffany. And we're working on a press release that'll go out probably maybe tomorrow. Friday's a bad day for press releases, so it won't go out Friday. If it doesn't go out tomorrow, but so we have our match committed of $20,000 to that project, but you can see it's a $1.3 million project. So yeah, that's all that I have. Oh, I do have one other thing I have to say. This is totally unrelated to communication broadband or whatever else I'm supposed to be talking about. It has to do with plants, and a shout out to Melissa Burke, so Melissa and Margaret Murphy planted all of the native plants in the front of the building. And Melissa is our little Mary, quite contrary, every evening or many evenings out there watering after work to keep those little honeys alive. So I really appreciate her efforts to keep that, to keep them growing.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you very much. And thank you for keeping the plants alive. That's wonderful. And do we have an update on the Dunn County Tourism website?
The only update that I have is that they're still plugging away at filling up the stuff. We've had it's been difficult to get people to put the information in, but I think by the time our next meeting rolls around, we'll have that baby ready to go. So about time.
So what do you need people to fill in? So tourism businesses or?
Well, yeah, it's basically what we've done with the site is create a directory of tourism related businesses. And it's kind of, if you build it, they'll come. So we want to fill in enough of the categories so there's basically enough of a site so that it has value to people from outside of Dunn County as well as people in the county. And so that it gets to the point where it's got enough information in there that people go, okay, I don't see my business or I don't see my tourism activity listed. How do I get on it? Right now, there's not enough of that there. So it needs to all be seeded, and having people do that for the budget that is able to do it has been a little bit of a challenge. Plus, part of the thing is that person or people, they need to have some ability to write. They need to write short either descriptions or take existing information and be able to rewrite it so it's not basically lifted from another place. So that creates it so that it's not just something that somebody off the street can do. So that's been some of the challenge. We've had a couple of the categories finished, but we need to finish up the rest of the categories. And that's what I hope to have unveiling by the next time this committee meets.
do you need any additional information from people or any thoughts?
We're,
help
we're
fill in the
gonna need
gaps?
information from people at a certain point, but right now it's kind of, it's almost like looking at and harvesting some of the information that's out there to at least populate the site. And then after that, my hope is that it'll be that people will want to add information because they're gonna see that there are competing businesses or other types of activities listed and theirs is not. So they'll want to add it, but right now there's not that incentive for people to add that stuff. It could be something that maybe you do while you're sitting at the bookshop.
Well, I was asking, yeah, what areas are you missing?
For the now it's a couple of different areas. Right now we're adding to the lodging area, and I'm trying to think which categories we're still trying to add to. We have like a dining category all completed, working on the lodging category now, but it's almost any type of category, and there might be some categories that we haven't even thought of, such as I don't know that we've had storefronts and that type of thing. That would be another one that we'd be adding, would be like retailers.
Any other questions? All right. So it looks like we don't have any action items. And our next meeting is Tuesday, July 11th at 4:30. Any other announcements?
Fantastic job, Ann, running the meeting.
All right, we're adjourned at 6:01. Thank you all.